Canadians are living longer, healthier lives than ever before. But while seniors might know that, it's not always clear to the rest of us. And that can leave older generations facing loneliness, isolation, and even ageism. Joining us now to reflect on modern society's treatment of the elderly, Susan Pinker, developmental psychologist and author of The Village Effect, How Face-to-Face Contact Can Make Us Healthier and Happier. Michael Gordon, professor of medicine in the Division of Geriatrics at the University of Toronto, and Marcia Skolowski, co-director of ethics at Baycrest Health Sciences and assistant professor at the University of Toronto. Welcome to the three of you. And Susan, I know you had a really busy morning, so thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
I wanted to start by looking at some stats about the elderly in Canada. According to StatsCan, in 2015, for the first time ever, there were more Canadians 65 years and older than children 14 years old and younger. Nearly 1 in 6 Canadians, that's 16.1%, were 65 plus. By 2024, the number is projected to grow to 1 in 5. 50% of seniors over the age of 80 report feeling lonely. 44% of seniors in residential care show symptoms of or have been diagnosed with depression. And this really surprised me. Men 80 years or older have the highest suicide rate of all age groups. And I would also like to read something from Jared Diamond's most recent book, The World Until Yesterday, What We Can Learn from Traditional Societies. And he writes, on the one hand, people live longer. Old people enjoy better physical health, and the rest of society can better afford to care for them than at any previous time in human history. On the other hand, old people have lost most of the traditional usefulness that they offer to society, and they often end up socially more miserable while physically healthier. Susan, I wanted to start with you. So socially more miserable while physically healthier. What do you think of that?
Well, I think there's a trade-off, of course, between the advantages we get in a modern society, which are that certainly our elderly are more financially independent, they are healthier, they can often afford to live on their own if that's what they choose to do, and they have more privacy and independence. But the trade-offs for all of those benefits are that they don't have the same kind of closeness to their children and grandchildren that they do enjoy in more traditional societies. So you kind of get benefits on the one hand and trade-offs on the other, and it's a question of, the balance of the two, I would say. And also, I would like to say just at the outset, because of the other experts with us today, that I think it's really unfair in a way to categorize the elderly as, say, 60 plus, because there's two groups there. We used to say there was childhood and adulthood, and then all of a sudden adolescence came into play. And I think now, because people are living longer, we have to add another age group, say the healthy, active aging, the aging well, say from 60 to 80, and I could say an older group, say from 80 up.
Well, I mean, there's a great rap artist, I'm not sure you know him, Jay-Z, and he always says 40 is the new 30 because, But Marcia, what do you think about that? Socially more miserable while physically healthier. What do you think of that?
I think that's absolutely true. And I think that we have to, ask ourselves, what kind of moral community do we want to live in? And what are our moral obligations so that regardless of what age you are, that you can have a flourishing life. And I think it's up to us younger folks. Mm-hmm.
So you think it's a moral obligation?
I would fall. I do. Mm-hmm. I absolutely do think it's an obligation. And I think we have to think about how we define ourselves in such, utilitarian sort of means. How productive we are is a measure of such importance that we're leaving out people who have much to contribute in maybe not such typical ways.
And Jared, Michael, what do you think about what Jared said?
I thought you were going to call me Jared. If I get his royalties, I'll accept the name. I want to just frame it a little differently. I'm not sure what we're talking about is uniquely attributable to the elderly in North America. I'll say the Western world, Western Europe, whatever. Because the other parts of the world do have different constructs. But the kind of experiences that older people have, younger people have as well. There's a lot of social isolation, there's a lot of mental health, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's part of our world. I sometimes like to look at the world sort of anthropologically. This is our culture and our world, for good and for bad, with all its warts and benefits. It has a mixture of things. And one of the problems I see in North America in particular, and part of it is our culture, our networks are sparse because we move. Nobody stays at home. I mean, traditionally, you move. Your children are here, your parents are here, your friends are there, all the other things that go on with life are there, but we don't have that cohesive, which is either good or bad, depending if you want to get your degree at the University of British Columbia and you're from Toronto.
What else do you think is leading to this, I guess, culture of isolation in our society today? Marcia?
Well, I think, first of all, if we look at different families, you can be, as Michael said, quite isolated and lonely as a child. And I think that regardless of where one is living, I mean, you need to look at the kinds of relationships that people are keeping with each other. And I think that you can have a real culture of isolation and loneliness with the elderly. And I think that because I'm a psychologist and I've worked with younger children and have seen depression and very angry behaviors, very aggressive behaviors for really young kids, there's a sense that there's some disconnection somewhere between the generations. I like to take an intergenerational approach in understanding this. And often with younger people, I have noticed in practice who suffer from depression and anxiety, et cetera, they're really acting as a stand-in for what's going on between the next generation and the one above. So I find that they can be wonderful co-therapists in a sense when you're dealing with kids who are acting out. But the thing is that you really, it doesn't matter where you enter in the intergenerational scheme of things, I think you will find that there is often detachment and separations that need to be remedied.
And Susan, in your latest book, The Village Effect, you traveled to Sardinia, Italy. Why did you travel there?
Well, there is an incredible gap in longevity between a certain area in Sardinia called the Blue Zone, which is a mountainous area in the southeast, and the rest of Italy, mainland Italy, and the rest of the developed world. So there are 6 times as many centenarians who live in that area as live in the rest of Italy, so it's not very far away, as much as maybe 200 kilometers away. People are living shorter lives in general. And there are 10 times as many as in North America. And we tend to be pretty glib about the things that we provide, the health care, for example, the organization that modern life provides. And yet, in these traditional societies, they're doing something right that we're not doing. So I went there to find out what it was, because I had the science in front of me, but the science didn't tell the whole story.
So what are they doing?
Well, for one thing, the older people are the center of their society. They get a lot of respect and TLC. They are surrounded by people constantly. Now, I will say, Nam, from one journalist to another, this was a problem for me, because everywhere I went, I expected to get a clean interview and clean sound, because I was making a radio documentary at the time. And I'd walk into a room full of people. The neighbors were there, sometimes the priest was there, usually children, nieces, nephews were there. And it became obvious after I did 1, 2, 3 interviews with centenarians that they're never left alone. For good or for ill, they're always surrounded by people. And there's a sense that they belong, even as they start to decline and enter their very senior years. There's always somebody there for them to, for example, prepare food that they can chew, or to provide company if they want it. They're not kind of pushed aside, which happens, I think, as people become less mobile in our society, less capable of participating. So that was one obvious difference. The other obvious difference I found, and this is an irony, another irony, which is that there was less of a gender difference in who does the care there. Here, caring for people is considered women's work.
Still.
Either low paid women's work where you hire somebody, usually they're women, or in the family, it's still women's work. And women now have jobs, they have children who place demands on them, and now their parents are aging. Some of them even have aging grandparents. And what's interesting to me is there, everybody pitched in. The sons pitched in. I mean, I interviewed one centenarian whose two sons were looking after him, and they were in his 70s, their 70s. So, and there was no question. They said to me clearly, the people who were my own generation, everybody does it here. So the scientist who was assisting me, Dr. Johnny Pez, said, you know, everybody does it. He had a busy scientific life, he publishes, but every Sunday he spends it with his mother, and he asks her advice. So he respects her advice. So the second difference is that there is a gender difference, and I think we still have a lot to do to step up to the plate on that regard. And I think the other difference, you know, so we have respect, we have a gender difference, but is the one that you mentioned right away, which is that there's less mobility, less geographic mobility. So people can age in place. They are living next to the neighbor they lived next to for maybe 65 years, who knows them intimately.
And then I guess that goes into the social fabric of the community. Michael, what can we learn from that?
You know, I find it interesting because I've traveled a lot and I've been to all kinds of countries that have traditional, not traditional, less traditional. This is our world. I mean, to say, wouldn't it be nice if we had a more, there are parts of Ontario and Canada that have more traditional worlds. I just had an intern, a resident they call now, PGY, who's a 10th generation Ontarian. All of the family are farmers. They all live in farms in the neighborhood. She's left the farm. She intends to go back to the farming. You know, I mean, why a society develops the way, I have a great interest in anthropology, just because I find it interesting. And I have a daughter who's studying it, who is an anthropologist, and we talk a lot. I mean, whatever happens in the world happens for many, many reasons. But once you have a construct, which is the North American construct, with all its good and its bad and its evil and its wonders and whatever, to try and capture, because I think that's what we're talking about, some of the values that we recognize are good values, to try to capture them, and maybe the word is retrofit them into a more North American modern way of living is not easy.
But do you think that because we live in North America, as somebody who's growing up here, I feel that there's an emphasis on the individual over the family?
Well, for sure. Yeah. Now, the question is, let's say that's the construct. And in the world of ethics, which Marsha and I do, autonomy sort of entered in the 70s. Before that, it was beneficence. The doing of good was your primary goal. Now it's autonomy, and we've made it into a religion. Whatever the traditional religions, the one that is overriding is autonomy. We keep talking about autonomy. People have the right to this. The thing is, let's say we can identify deficiencies. How do you retrofit? How do you raise your children who have their world to actually care about an older grandparent? I was partially raised by a grandparent, not because we had this wonderful, lovey family. That's all we could afford. Right. Post-war, I shared a bedroom with my sister and my grandmother. I'll say, whether you believe in God or nature, God bless her, because she had a profound influence on me. Not because I became a geriatrician, because she told me stories. Children don't hear stories from their grandparents anymore because they're watching television or doing their S12 iPod or whatever. I mean, that's missing. Well, and that's essential to forming relationships and caring. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that, because in kind of putting autonomy up on a pedestal, it also means that it's sometimes very hard to offer assistance, because it's seen as a failure of that older or aging person. Oh my God, like, I can't ask for help because that means I'm not autonomous or I'm losing independence. Whereas I would say one of those values that in a perfect world I would like to retrofit is the grace of knowing how to ask for help and how to accept assistance, where we all realize we all need each other, whatever age it is. So getting back to the idea of loneliness being a common problem not only among the elderly. I mean, we know that 1 out of 4 in Canada say they have nobody they can lean on. It's pretty dramatic.
That's heartbreaking, especially in this age of connection and social media. You wanted to say something?
Well, I was going to say that in terms of what we can do at Baycrest Health Sciences, we have what I'd call a narrative ethics projects that we have done, where we bring together through different generations, for example, high school students who come in and spend time with the elderly and get to know them as human beings, as people, not just as, you know, Mr. or Mrs. whoever in bed 3 with Alzheimer's. I asked these individuals later, has this opened up conversations in a different way between you and your own grandparents? Because it's one thing, I think, to open up space and talk to the elderly who you're not connected with.
But to have
Perhaps
also
it's
something
easier.
common. I'm glad you brought that up because we wanted to show a clip from a documentary where kind of the same thing happens, but with younger children, and they go into a daycare. Let's take a look at the documentary.
What do you think is going to happen to you guys? You think you're going to stay 3 and 4 and 5 forever? Never ever? You have to be a grown-up sometime.
No.
No?
I don't know if I can do it. I can't even do it.
There you go. Can you get it in there? Keep working on it.
Can I sing? Ave Maria. You know how you love somebody and they give you something, you know how hard it hits you on your heart. Hot ones running out of my eyes.
If you go back to that village effect, the elderly were never segregated. Is finding a way to have more intergenerational mixing an important part of the solution?
I think it's a really interesting idea, and there are a couple of examples of that, not only putting preschoolers together with older folks, but I know in Holland they have something called the Humanitas Project, where they offer free lodging and meals to university students who live in residences with older folks. And it's a kind of a benefit for both, because as you say, they learn stories that they would not have otherwise. And there's less loneliness for them, because let's face it, as we have said, it's not just a problem among the elderly or among the aging. People in Canada between the ages of 20 and 30, and especially the early 20s when they're leaving home, for example, are among the loneliest groups. So there's what we call a bimodal distribution, where it's high in the young area, then it goes down a little bit and it comes up again. So here you have those two groups, you put them together, and that it's a wonderful solution to a problem. I don't think it fixes everything.
It seems so simple, right?
I want to just say something.
Yeah.
It's almost like that cliche. It's over and over again. We've been around this block. We've read this playbook. So I studied in Dundee, Scotland. I went to medical school in Scotland. So the first 2 places I lived in had landladies. Who were the landladies? 2 wonderful older women who rented out a part of one was a house, the other was an apartment, who took students in order to, 1, have an income, they had pensions, and have company, and a purpose. And both of these landladies, that were quite different in their personalities, were wonderful people. And I just wrote something on it. I attribute, and they lived a long time with all kinds of medical problems, because once you're a medical student, and you're living with a landlady, you can be sure you've heard everything. Over tea, you've heard everything. But I attribute to whatever else was in their lives, their longevity. And one of them had a family, because I met the family every Sunday. The other one was a widow with no children, but she had a dog. And I'm a big believer in animals. And she had this whole network of students, all of whom knew her. Like when she walked downstairs, probably 30 students walking would say, "Hello, Mrs. So-and-so." That was a network. She was never alone. And despite her smoking unbelievably, she lived to a very old age. So it's not as if they invented this in, would you say Vancouver?
No, this was in the Netherlands.
Netherlands, yeah. I mean, but the thing is, this has been around for a long time. We just, for whatever reason, if you looked at York University, Seneca, I'm looking up north, where you have residential areas. I do not know how many of those students are living in private homes. I'm willing to bet they're living in some as rentees, but rentees which was different from the way I lived with landladies.
But I want to pick up on that theme because it means that those landladies in Dundee, Scotland, took the initiative to say, I'm going to remedy this situation and I'm going to get a little more income. I'm going to get somebody to take out the garbage. I'm going to have somebody to talk to. And I remember when I lived, a couple of my neighbors did the same thing. They were left alone in big houses and they took in students. However, there is a sense in, I think, our society at large, I don't think it's that common. I don't know what the numbers are, that's the generation where we give to them and they accept passively, as opposed to them stepping forward and saying, what can I do? For example, so these ladies were very, I would say, proactive, but there are many of, they say, the active retirees, they spend their time, for example, playing bridge and playing bingo, and it's great that they're social. But sometimes it makes me think, you know, it would be so great if they read to young children who are immigrants whose parents can't read to them, or if they volunteered their time in more productive ways and inserted themselves in an active way in society.
Well, I mean, there's this idea.
There's so many who do that all the time. But that's what they do with their later. They're not renting out apartments. I mean, that's something you have to be comfortable for all kinds of reasons. It may not be part of our culture anymore, but they're doing things. They're volunteering.
They need to feel empowered.
Well, this idea too of wisdom, like wisdom passed from the elderly.
Yes.
Before, if you had a question, if you wanted to know something, you would go to someone who's older. But it doesn't seem like that anymore. Why is there that disconnect now? Susan, did you want to pick up on that?
Well, you could say that they can Google it.
Right.
But I will say that, you know, I was just talking to my husband and who got a call from our son who had a question about whether his tire was flat. Okay.
I just had to say that.
So, I mean, he didn't Google it, he picked up the phone. And there are, I guess, connections that you have that are more comforting, more personal, and give you more background. So I think in a way, our emphasis on technology is often the path of least resistance. But I think both parties lose something in that because they get the facts. But sometimes, as you say, it's about the story, not about the facts.
And there are things that you can't find on Google, right, Michael?
No, I mean, wisdom and experience are not easily captured in our digital world. It's very good at data and information, which is not knowledge.
Right.
Data and information as a use, I find it overly emphasized. You see it also in the way journalists report things, as, you know, this is data, this data. Data means nothing. Data comes and goes. Information's a little better, but knowledge means it's withstood the test of trying and doing, and it often gets lost. And therefore, for those of us who have children, it's funny because I literally just had the flat tire call, because that's experience and wisdom. I mean, I guess you could look up, and there's a YouTube somewhere that shows you a flat tire versus, and what tests you could do. But a parent who's been around that block is a very good, is a very good resource.
And
Very good way. And
we don't privilege
we don't tend to do that.
emotional and social ways of knowing. I mean, we're so involved in a particular definition, very hypercognitive sort of sense of what it means to have intelligence or to have knowledge, to know, to be worthy. And we're missing out, you know, tremendously at all different stages and ages because of that. And we don't ask and reinforce the notion of what kind of legacy do we all want to, you know, leave. And how can we be part of legacy leaving for the elders? And we need to structure ways of being with them because it's not happening naturally for a variety of reasons that we've already discussed.
And Marcia, if you could change one thing in Canada in terms of the well-being of seniors, what would be the first thing that you would change?
I think I would change the education system so that there is much more of an intergenerational approach built into it formally.
And Susan?
I think I would change the geography of how our cities were built, as well as some of the more human relations aspects, so that people are not physically isolated up in condo towers or residences, where when we plan our cities, and let's face it, we live in Canada. It is cold here. It's often icy. Seniors are afraid to walk outside. So there is often no way for them to meet people of different ages and generations. They're stuck in places where they only meet people like themselves. And I don't think it's that fun or stimulating. It's much more fun to walk down the street and talk to people who come from different backgrounds. So certainly I agree with you, Marcia, education is key. But also, I would love to see urban planning, architecture designed around the needs of different ages and our climate. I did an event here in Toronto at the Toronto Library, and many people stood up and said, the winters are so hard for us. We are isolated all winter because we cannot get out, we cannot see people, we cannot participate. And it would be so interesting to look at our cities as a way of bringing people together instead of pushing them into their own little unique cells. We could call them autonomy cells, Michael, or independent cells, which is how we conceive of it now. They have their own little unit, and we leave them there.
Michael, a few seconds left.
Without the ability to retrofit our world, we have our cities, we have our urban, it would take us another 100 years to try to reconfigure. So you say, what in our world could we do? I lean a bit towards Marcia. If we could find a way to bring people to recognize that in those big towers, there are many people who have a wealth of wisdom, of interest, of humor, and bring them to them, whether it's from the early school, somehow build it in as part of your life. Your life now consists that on Thursday you visit Mrs. Green in that big condo up there that nobody knows who built it, but it's there. And you're going to have a shared experience about how she came over on the Lusitania just before it was torpedoed.
Michael, thank you so much for being here. Marcia and Susan, thank you so much for this engaging conversation.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.